the bells toll for a general strike in Czechoslovakia. Leaders of the new revolution say the bell has tolled for communism. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting tonight live from cold and snowy Wenceslas Square, the heart of Prague and of Czechoslovakia. Good evening. The future of Eastern Europe may well be determined in the next few days here in Prague, in Rome, and in Malta. Later in the week, we'll be covering the first meeting ever between the leader of the Soviet Union and the Pope. And that will be on the eve of the very first post-Cold War summit between President Bush and Mikhail Gorbachev. But the fundamental issues of freedom, these are being fought out here in the streets, in the churches, and in the factories of Czechoslovakia. And today was a crucial victory for the freedom movement. Dawn broke today with an astonishing new landmark on the scene in Prague, a Liberty Bell, in the place where a statue of Joseph Stalin once looked down. But would it ring? This was the day of testing, the day when young people and others who have taken over Wenceslas Square in the capital for a week would find out if the masses nationwide were with them. They called a 2-hour national strike for noon, and when the sirens blew, the workers gave their answer. At the giant CKD industrial complex and at factories and mines all over the country, workers walked out. They rallied, they sang, they chanted. Long live the students. Communist Party bosses had harangued the workers, threatened them, pleaded with them. It was a referendum on the nation's future, and the results were a landslide. By the millions, workers joined the cause and made it the will of the nation. But leaders of the movement, people who feared for their lives even a week ago, stressed with fervor today that theirs is a non-violent, forgiving revolution, aimed not just at overturning the power of the communists, but restoring a sense of decency and civilization to the whole country.
Even the most backward Stalinists still must have a way to express their ideas. We mustn't discriminate against anyone, not to even talk about people going at communist throats. You know, a single death is really a great threat, even one, if it happened, you know, some communist being lynched or something at this moment.
The force of this new revolution gained another wave of concessions from the communist government today. More Politburo members fired, more party privileges revoked. But tonight, at yet another huge rally, the opposition kept pressing toward their ultimate goal. They will not be content with more reforms. They want a whole new system, a free country. There may be more huge rallies in the days ahead, but today's successful strike puts the forces of freedom, the leaders of the new revolution, in the driver's seat. They are putting heavy pressure on the communist Prime Minister, Vladislav Adamets, to make more changes much faster or be out in favor of someone such as the respected economist Walter Komarek. The ultimate goal is to demolish the Communist Party's dominance in this country, to move quickly to free elections and a multi-party system. This is now a broad-based national movement, reaching all classes and all parts of the country. Tom Fenton spent the day in Czechoslovakia's second largest city, Bratislava, capital of the Slovak state.
At noon, as the general strike began, Bratislava came to a halt. A human chain of demonstrators snaked through the streets of the old city. Striking salesgirls cheered them on. It's not just Prague, the whole country is on its feet and cheering. Here in Bratislava, there was never a strong tradition of activism or reform. But now the people here want to be part of the great national reawakening. Half the city's population took to the streets. Freedom, freedom, they chanted. We will stay here forever if they don't change things. But already, things here have changed beyond recognition. We woke up, says this woman. For years, says this man, everyone lied to us. Finally, we are allowed to speak the truth. And the truth is, these people want nothing more to do with the government or the Communist Party. Bratislava, they say, has joined the free world. Jazz musician Joseph Sosoka missed the Prague Spring of 1968. Today, he stood with his fellow countrymen and sang the Slovak national anthem.
I was crying many times because it's something very great. It's something very great what's happened here.
Then the crowd sent a message to Prague and beyond, symbolically ringing the death knell of communism. The message from the Slovak heartland is that this time there will be no turning back. Tom Fenton, CBS News, Bratislava.
There is another aspect of this revolution we haven't talked about yet. This is a religious movement, too. And my colleague Richard Threlkeld has taken a look at that.
And Dan, you can't begin to understand the yearning for political freedom here unless you understand its link to religious freedom.
This statue, the Holy Infant of Prague, is one of the most venerated objects in all of Christianity. It's been here since the 16th century.
And Christianity has been here a lot longer than communism, going back to St. Wenceslas, good King Wenceslas, who built the first church on the hills outside of Prague back in the year 925. Prague is a city of churches. It has been so for half a millennium, and you'd feel just as comfortable in church here on a Sunday morning as in Cleveland or St. Louis. But there's a difference, and it's not just the language. The Roman Catholic Church in Czechoslovakia is not free. For 41 years, it has been a captive of the communists. The government licenses the priests and pays their salaries. It discourages religious instruction for the children, and it's reluctant to allow people to read anything that has to do with God. When the Catholic Charities bookstore has a new edition out, the line for the few precious copies goes around the block. It's testament to the staying power of faith that 60% of the people here proclaim themselves Catholic, and a consequence of the faith and sacrifice of some remarkable men and women of God. Like the Cardinal, František Tomášek, aged 90, he spent 3 years in a forced labor camp for practicing his ministry without a license. For 10 years now, he's been speaking out for freedom, for his church, for his country.
The duty of all Christians is to defend basic human rights.
When we encountered Father Václav Mali a few days ago, he was alone in the cemetery, fueling the lamp at his parents' grave. Once he was a young priest at the cathedral in Pilsen, but he sacrificed it all to join a human rights group and became a dissident. The government took away his priest's license, sent him to prison, and set him to cleaning public toilets when he got out. What he's been trying to change most of all is the hypocrisy of life under communism, the quiet, docile face the people must put on in public to mask their private convictions. He calls it a two-faced life, and he thinks he knows why now so many young people are coming to the church.
They want to live a one-faced life, the same behavior in private sphere and the same behavior in public sphere. And they guess that the Christian faith gives them chance to live one-faced life.
Father Mali's faith in the young was not misplaced. They set in motion the remarkable train of events that changed Czechoslovakia this past week. Now it seemed everybody had decided to find the courage to live a one-faced life and stand up for freedom. And suddenly, Father Václav Mali was alone no longer. He was one of the first dissidents to address the cheering crowds in St. Wenceslas Square.
It will continue. We must win this struggle.
Thank you, Father.
And the Cardinal, he has given his blessing to the demands of his people for liberty. He may live long enough to see the day they can finally freely vote their consciences and worship their God. In the center of Prague is Czechoslovakia's Statue of Liberty, St. Wenceslas, the patron saint. He was said to be a worker of miracles. It's been a long time between miracles in Czechoslovakia, but there are those here who firmly believe that with some help from his countrymen, good King Wenceslas is working another one now. And Dan, I talked with Father Molly a couple of days ago. He said he can't get up to the cemetery as often anymore, but he thinks his mother and father will understand.
Thanks, Richard. In a moment, Bob Schieffer will be around with some of the rest of the day's news, and we'll be back in Prague, covering, as we will all week from here and in Rome, the momentous confrontation of communism and religion. God and Gorbachev.
A Colombian airliner bound from Bogota to the drug center of Cali exploded and crashed today. Shortly after takeoff, all 107 passengers and the crew members were killed. A caller to a Bogota radio station said that drug traffickers bombed the Boeing 727 to kill several police informants on board. The claim has not been authenticated, and investigators at the crash site say they have as yet found no evidence of a bomb. In Chicago today, doctors operated in the hope that they might save the life of one infant girl. The surgery has never before been performed in this country, but if it is successful, it could mean life for hundreds of other babies. Medical correspondent Susan Spencer reports.
29-year-old Terry Smith went into surgery this morning ready literally to sacrifice part of herself to save her daughter Alyssa, who has been waiting more than a year for a liver transplant.
To me, it's a neat feeling to be able to provide that for my child.
In a landmark operation, surgeons removed a piece of Terry's liver and transplanted it into her daughter. It's the first time in this country a living person has donated liver tissue for transplant. And if it works, it has enormous implications.
It really opens up the organ pool, which is the fundamental roadblock to liver transplantation to date.
700 children a year need livers. At any given moment, more than 100 are waiting. Roughly a third of them die waiting.
When you wait, you play a waiting game. And sometimes, you know, my daughter would be sicker and sicker.
The sole purpose of this program is to provide a graft for every needy infant recipient.
That's been the dream of transplant surgeons for years. It will be at least a week before the outcome of this operation is known, with potentially many children's lives in the balance. Susan Spencer, CBS News, Washington.
The president of India dissolved parliament today after elections had proved a disaster for Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. Nearly complete results now give Gandhi's Congress party the most seats, but it also leaves it considerably short of its former majority. It's not clear yet whether Gandhi will resign or try to form a coalition with opposition groups. The United States threatened today to suspend all financial support of the United Nations if the General Assembly votes this week to recognize Palestine as a country. The State Department said that Palestine is not a country and does not meet the criteria for UN membership. The Supreme Court refused today to let public schools drop special education programs for severely handicapped children, even when the children are so handicapped they do not seem to get any benefit. In effect, today's ruling means these schools must keep trying to find programs that will help these children. For the first time since the Supreme Court cleared the way last July for the executions of juveniles convicted of murder, the state of Louisiana plans to execute one later this week, a convicted murderer who killed twice before he turned 18 and who spent the last decade on death row. Late today, the Louisiana Pardon Board voted 3-2 to recommend life without parole, but unless the governor goes along, the execution is still set for early Thursday. 60 Minutes correspondent Mike Wallace is in Louisiana tonight, and here's his report.
Dalton Prejean is now 29. When he was 14, he shot and killed a taxi driver and was sent to a reform school. When he was 17, he shot and killed Louisiana State Trooper Donald Cleveland, who was frisking his brother after a traffic violation, and he was sentenced to death. He has lived here on death row at the state pen in Angola, Louisiana for 10 years. And shortly after midnight on Wednesday, he is scheduled to die here in the electric chair. You think about dying?
No.
Not afraid?
No.
Not afraid of the chair?
No.
No one disputes the fact that Dalton Prejean is guilty. But in last-minute appeals today, his friends and family, his doctors and lawyers, argued that he should not be executed. They say the jury that sentenced him didn't hear all about him.
Dalton Prejean suffers from a history of abuse and brain damage. The impulsive acts he's done are destructive, but a humane society looks to the causes, the reasons why things occur. In my view, a humane society would not put Dalton Prejean to death.
And his attorneys say Prejean was sent to death row by an all-white jury that didn't hear any of this. But almost overlooked in the 11th hour efforts to spare Dalton Prejean's life are the lives of Candace Cleveland and her children. After all, Trooper Donald Cleveland wasn't the only victim of Prejean's violence.
Why should he live to shoot someone and hear that person holler in pain and then for Donald to fall in a ditch and literally he bled to death?
You think the proper punishment for Dalton Prejean would be what?
I would like to live with my mistake.
Live in prison?
Yeah.
Rest of your life?
Rest of my life.
Tough question, honest answer. Could you go in there and pull the switch on Wednesday night?
Yes.
You could.
But before that switch is pulled, Dalton Prejean and his defenders hope this phone will ring with news that the governor of Louisiana has called off the execution. Mike Wallace, CBS News, Angola, Louisiana.
Space Shuttle Discovery began dropping out of orbit a short while ago. Touchdown now expected about 7:30 tonight Eastern Time at California's Edwards Air Force Base. NASA delayed the landing originally set for yesterday because of high winds over the California desert. The White House confirmed today that President Bush will discuss reducing troop levels in Europe with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev next weekend during their summit at sea off Malta. But Mr. Bush's spokesman, Marlin Fitzwater, also says the United States does not expect any formal arms agreements out of the summit. Hungary's rulers conceded today that they lost yesterday's historic referendum. That means there will be no direct election for a new president in January. That could have favored the government candidate. Instead, the president will be chosen next spring by a newly elected parliament, almost certain to be controlled by the opposition. Well, that's it from here. Dan Rather will be back with more from Prague in just a moment.
The Pope on Friday are not just political events. They are events in the history of the human spirit. To look at them from that perspective, from that depth, we talk to two people with long experience with the Soviet Union and who see the movement of the spirit in all of history. I asked the Reverend Billy Graham, the world-famed preacher and evangelist, and Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Prize-winning survivor of the Holocaust, how they see the upheaval here in Eastern Europe.
I think that it's a genuine upheaval that's been going on for a long time. I've sensed it ever since I first started going to Eastern Europe. And I think it's, as Solzhenitsyn has pointed out, that it's a religious upheaval. I think that when they attached atheism to communism, that this was a wrong move. And it went against human nature because everyone believes that there is a supernatural being.
Let's talk about Mr. Gorbachev's meeting with the Pope. You're bound to have thought about it, read about it. What meaning does it have for you?
To me, it's an encounter between two men who are leaders of two world religions. Gorbachev, actually, being the communist leader, is also the leader of the communist religion. Communism has been a religion, hence its strength and its ambiguities. When we study the major moments of what was in the beginning the victory and then the debacle of communism, one is struck by the vocabulary. The vocabulary is a mystical vocabulary. They used to speak about redemption, they used to speak about purification, they used to speak about purges, almost sanctification, and in fact the leader of the Communist Party was a saint.
Marx said that religion is the opiate of the people. Now, Marxism, Leninism, Stalinism, as we have known it, is at the very least in a period of cataclysmic change, if indeed it isn't dissolving before our very eyes. Does this mean Marx was wrong?
Marx was definitely wrong. I think that if Marx had it to do over again, he would leave out this whole subject of atheism, because they've propagandized atheism and it hasn't worked. And the people, I would say 80 to 90% of the Russian people believe in God. I think he made a great error when he talked about atheism and hooked it on to communism. I think communism could have been much more effective in the world had it not been for the fact that they were propagandizing atheism.
I have the feeling that what we are witnessing now in the world, in the Eastern European world especially, is the abdication of communism. It is the end of the communist ideology. The reality caught up with the word, and it is bankrupt.
To those who say what we are seeing with all these sweeping changes and communism seemingly coming apart at the seams as both a political and an economic system, that this is a triumph of faith over ideology. Do you see it that way?
It is a triumph of the young people. I like to think that. I'm moved when I see young people on the screen. The way they prevailed. In Czechoslovakia, they are still fighting, but they will prevail. To me, it means that we, the elder generation, actually should be responsible for them, because we have made now them responsible for a world that they have not created. The world now that we are bequeathing onto them has been destroyed by us. And now we say, now it's up to you, rebuild it on the ruins of our past. Is this fate? It is fate. It is, but a painful one, an anguished one.
And that's part of our world tonight. Dan Rather reporting for the CBS Evening News this evening from the Church of the Infant Jesus in Prague, Czechoslovakia. Tomorrow night, we'll have more from our series on communism and religion. So see you tomorrow. Good night.
That'll be a charge.
We interrupt this purchase for a reminder.
Don't forget, Santa.
'Tis the season to be choosy.
La, 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 la.
That's it.
So choose the card that actually pays you cash back for every charge. The Discover card.
The freedom to say and think what we believe, to express our individuality and diversity. That's our birthright, and it's ensured by this document. Join us and the National Archives in celebrating the 200th anniversary of the Bill of Rights.
Victor Kayam.
Hi.
I need your advice on a great shaving gift for my husband.
The Remington microscreen shaves as close as a blade or your money back. No other shaver makes that promise. It has 2 flexible screens that shave you incredibly close.
Perfect. Maybe my husband will buy the company.
The Remington microscreen shaves as close as a blade or your money back. No other shaver makes that promise. Now, buy this Remington and get a hygienic clipper free.
I'm Kathleen Sullivan. Tomorrow, the latest on the remarkable changes in Czechoslovakia. Also, Julia Roberts from Steel Magnolias joins us on CBS This Morning.
This is CBS.